Tocqueville, French historian, politician, and founder of sociology, political sociology. Born into a noble family, he lived through 5 dynasties: the First French Empire, the Bourbon dynasty, the July monarchy, the Second French Republic, and the Second French Empire. Enthusiastic about politics in his early years, Tocqueville is a giant in the history of modern political thought. He is also the first democratic philosopher. From the perspective of a French aristocrat with fallen ties, he explored the merits and demerits of the American democratic system, and thereby conducted an in-depth study of the democratic system itself. His insights and predictions continue to influence the development of democracy in the world. He was a genius and a great thinker. When he was 26, he visited the United States for 9 months and wrote the classic Democracy in America. After returning, he was 30 when the first volume was published in 1835, and 35 when the second volume was published in 1840. There are many great thinkers in history, and most of their famous works were completed in their later years or after the age of 40 or 50. The fact that Tocqueville wrote such a masterpiece at such a young age truly demonstrates his profound knowledge and strong insight. He was a very prescient thinker and predicted many things that later came to pass. For example, he predicted that there might be a war between the North and the South over slavery, and that the Union might fall apart. More than 20 years later, the American Civil War really broke out because of slavery. He also predicted that a democratic society would lead to the emergence of a welfare state. And today, the shadow of welfare states is everywhere in Europe and the United States. He also predicted that the United States and Russia might dominate the world in the future. And the US-Soviet rivalry did take place in the 20th century. On April 16, 1859, Tocqueville, the great historian and founder of political sociology, passed away. He is the watchman of freedom and the prophet of the revolutionary era. Everyone who cares about politics and freedom should keep Tocqueville's warning in mind. Tocqueville explains freedom so clearly. The difference between freedom under despotism, American freedom and French freedom, is so obvious here. Let us feel the breath of freedom together. What scares people is not the immorality of big men, but that immorality makes people become big men. The root cause of the demise of the old system: the poor pay taxes, while the rich are exempt from taxes. The basic effort of a community may be to try to make its members equal, but the individual self-esteem of its members always wants to stand out and create some kind of inequality that is beneficial to themselves. Opportunities are useless without careful preparation beforehand. Life is neither suffering nor pleasure, but a cause we should strive for and persevere to the end. Limit your thoughts to an idea and strive and act blindly within this idea. When kings went bankrupt due to their ostentation, and nobles lost their fortunes due to private fights, common people became rich through business. The influence of money began to be seen in state affairs. Business became a new ladder to enter the door of power, and financiers formed a political power group that was both despised and flattered. In the world, only patriotism or religion can make all citizens move towards the same goal in a sustained manner. People have limited energy and do not know how to use methods. Their judgments are always hasty and superficial. I believe that heaven is in the afterlife, and happiness is in this life. People's views change with the amount of wealth they have. People who have easy access to wealth have different views from those who have a hard time making money. History is a gallery with few originals but many copies. People with a clear concept of rights can express their will independently without being arrogant, and show obedience with integrity without being servile. A government, whatever its nature, must govern the governed. In order to oblige them to perform their duties, it must also protect itself against encroachments by the governed. In the United States, it is not about people obeying people, but people obeying justice or the law. A society ruled by law is more perfect than a society ruled by man. Although it seems that laws are also made by people, the effect of the rule of law is far greater than that of the rule of man. If you do not allow the people to be strong and independent, you will only get obedient subjects but never citizens, individual beings who value dignity and freedom. People seem to love freedom, but in fact they just hate their masters. When the past no longer illuminates the future, people's hearts will wander in darkness. Some nations take pleasure and pride in sacrificing their own will to satisfy the will of the sovereign, and thus retain a spiritual independence in obedience. Such nations are unhappy, but not degenerate. Moreover, there is a great difference between doing what one does not approve of and pretending to approve of it. The former is due to weakness, the latter to servility. American democracy is a democracy where people have freedom of speech, and there is no remnant of authoritarianism. People endure suffering patiently, thinking it is inevitable, but as soon as someone suggests ways to eliminate it, it becomes unbearable. The most dangerous moment for a bad government is usually when it begins to reform. The moment when a society is most likely to erupt in revolution is not when oppression is most brutal, but when oppression gradually recedes and it moves from autocracy to change. Even if this change is not initiated from top to bottom, but is forced by pressure from the people. Whoever seeks in freedom anything other than freedom itself deserves only slavery. There is a great difference between doing what you disapprove of and doing what you pretend to approve of. The former is done out of weakness, the latter out of servility. I hate when issues that do not interest me are discussed, and I feel distressed when things that I consider important are discussed. Among all living things, only humans have an innate sense of dissatisfaction with their own existence, and always hope that their life will be unlimited. Humans despise life and are afraid of death. The Great Revolution can be divided into two distinct phases. The first phase, in which the French seem to want to destroy everything of the old society. The second phase, in which they seem to want to restore something that they had abandoned. People tend to be independent of each other, and despotism makes them fall into a state of isolation. People tend to be indifferent to each other, and despotism makes them fall into a state of coldness towards each other. In an authoritarian society, there is no such thing as a stable and happy life. Everyone is anxious, eager to become a superior person, and afraid of becoming an inferior. As long as equality and despotism are combined, people's mental standards will always decline. Despots do not deny the beauty of freedom. They just want to enjoy it alone and claim that others do not deserve it. The greatness of America lies not in the fact that it is smarter than other countries, but in the fact that it is more capable of repairing the mistakes it has made. There is nothing more irresistible than a government that issues orders in the name of the people. Democracy and socialism have nothing in common except the word equality. But note the difference. Democracy seeks equality and freedom, while socialism tries to achieve it through oppression and slavery. Tyranny can rule without conviction, but freedom cannot. All those who wish to destroy the freedom of democratic nations should know that waging war is the quickest and most reliable means of doing so. Because part of the old system has been destroyed, what remains has become 1,000 times more vicious than before. The middle class's passion for public service has never been stronger. When a man acquires a small sum of money, he immediately buys a position instead of investing it in business. This pitiful obsession with public office has done more harm to the development of French agriculture and commerce than monopoly and agricultural taxes. Our enthusiasm for obtaining public office is no less than it was then, but there is one great essential difference. between those times and ours. Then the government sold public office, while today the government grants it. And today people can achieve their goals without spending money, just by selling their souls. In England, the nobility assumed all responsibilities in exchange for the right to rule, while in France, the nobility had always refused to pay taxes as compensation for the loss of political power. Deep in the hearts of the people, there is a general desire for official positions. This desire enslaves people's minds and becomes one of the sources of the Great Revolution. The peasants seem to have been eliminated from the entire nation and thrown aside. Suppression sometimes hinders the spread of ideas, but more often it accelerates it. The most important principle of democracy is not to eliminate huge wealth, but that wealth should not be concentrated in the hands of the same person. In a democratic system, there will be rich people with huge wealth, but they cannot form a social class. In order to obtain the many advantages of a free press, we must endure the evils it produces. In a country where there is freedom of assembly, secret societies cannot exist. America has many different groups and factions, but no cabal.